Wonderful good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So great to see you all here at the BMZ. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, you all are here for the topic of the day, the Shaping the Future with Africa, Young Entrepreneurship as a key to a just transition. We actually have 36 of these young African entrepreneurs here. They've been working hard yesterday. We're going to talk about that in a moment. And they are representatives of Africa's innovation ecosystem. They're from 15 African countries, and they represent a large range of different businesses, different industries. They range from renewable industry solutions, renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, fintech, biotech, waste management, healthcare, you name it, we've got it in the form of these wonderful young people, and they will be at the center of the stage and of our attention today. Special thanks very much to everybody who has decided to be a speaker here today. Great for you to come here, and we are looking forward that you share your thoughts and that we can discuss those with you. Warm welcome to all the international guests here, including the ambassadors, welcome excellency, diplomatic representatives, and to all of us joining us, ministers and everybody who's already been working hard, either at the workshop or yesterday at the high-level meeting that was, of course, one of the reasons why everybody is here in Berlin, and that is, of course, the meeting on the compact with Africa that Chancellor Scholz and, of course, the South Africans were co-heading. Now, there are two aspects that are also part and parcel of our context that we're meeting with. The one inside is, of course, job creation is one of the main issues, but they're not sort of jobs made, but entrepreneurs are the future. They make jobs, they bring economies to life, they bring social context, and they have a great potential. And then, of course, we do have that framing of the just transition. We don't just want transition, but it has to be just. So, BMZ, of course, has launched a new Africa strategy at the beginning of this year, and strategy is good, but then of course it demands implementation. And this dialogue on how to implement, on what to do best, is an ongoing process. Today we will be looking at 4 key areas of this Africa strategy, but we're looking at the job creation, as we've just mentioned earlier, and the promotion of just transition. So, ladies and gentlemen, everybody knows that everybody is here simply because of Chancellor Scholz inviting everybody yesterday. And I know that all of you that are here are taking part in one or the other event this week. And I think about 5 people in the first row have already been working hard yesterday together with Chancellor Scholz. I know that Mr. Adesina has been there, Mr. Kone, of course, and we're so happy that you are here and are joining us, Minister of Egypt, and we're going to be hearing you on the panel in a moment. So, having set out everything, ladies and gentlemen, you all have badges. And seeing that we're in the digital world, at the back of your badges are QR codes. On the QR code is the link to the website, and on the website you can actually find anything about everybody that is going to be up here on stage at any time. Also the agenda. Nevertheless, please let me just quickly run through. Of course, we're going to have the opening words by Minister Svenja Schulz, and she's about ready to jump on stage, but she's actually going to walk elegantly up on stage. So. Then, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to actually hear about what's been happening yesterday, what the results of the workshop were, policy recommendations. We're going to have a great keynote speaker, somebody who's been actually instrumental in developing a hell of a lot of these young entrepreneurs, not just in Africa, but he's already sort of gone beyond Africa into other continents. Last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have this panel discussion. And maybe with a little bit of your input. We're going to be reflecting upon the policy recommendations, and then we're going to close the day. And I know that for you, this is just one milestone, because then all the inputs from today will be influencing your work later on. And I think, dear Svenja, dear Minister Scholz, I think I've done enough. I think I would like to roll out a red carpet. Okay, it's a red dress, but okay. Give her a big applause, ladies and gentlemen, your host of the day. Woo!
Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, I don't mention everybody of you because then the time is over. I do it in the African way, all protocols observed. So thank you very much for being here. It's such a pleasure to discuss with you, to have you all here, and you're just here. This week is about cooperation between Germany and African actors. And yesterday, I was at the Compact with Africa, you just heard it before, and it brought together heads of states and international organizations to a deep discussion. But, ladies and gentlemen, the real summit is taking place today, here with you, and thank you for being here. And when I say I'm talking about the roughly 40 entrepreneurs from 15 African countries who are here with us, because they, as young entrepreneurs, are the continent's future. And the world's need their ideas and their innovations. And we need ideas like that of Reham Yahya from Egypt. With her startup, she developed biofertilizers from agricultural waste that are customized for different types of soil and crops. And she thus helps to improve food security and mitigate the negative environmental impacts of agriculture. A great idea, and we have her with us today. We need the ideas like that of Geraldine Muponanyama from Zimbabwe, with her advisory firm for the pre-seed stage business. She supports startups in the climate tech sector by providing technical assistance and funding for young entrepreneurs. She empowers them so that their innovative solutions create a significant impact. For instance, when startups in the energy sector improve access to electricity and at the same time create jobs in the renewable sector. We need ideas like that of Ariel Tio Tsamo from Cameroon. She set up an education center for children that encourage children to embrace digital technology from a young age and in this way promotes digital entrepreneurship. We need ideas like that of Eden Tedisi from Ethiopia. Her technology-based career platforms connects refugees and internally displaced people with opportunities for work, digital education, and entrepreneurship. This creates new prospects for the people and supports their integration. All these business ideas show one thing: when young people become entrepreneurs, they not only generate an income for themselves, they also create jobs for others, and through their innovations, they help to solve problems in societies. For instance, by providing digital solutions to improve access to education and financial services, like Ariel Kiteo Tsamo and Geraldine Muponanyama, or by promoting sustainable agriculture and food security, like Reham Yahya, or like Eden Tedesi, by supporting refugees so that they can make a contribution to society with their works and their ideas, and help to fully realize the potential of migration. Many people see these challenges mainly as problems. You, as young entrepreneurs, see them as possibilities. You see the opportunities that challenges bring. Your startups are embedded in local markets and local societies. You know local demands and potential and are able to develop customized solutions. You are harnessing the technologies of tomorrow. You act fast, you are agile, you have the courage to take risks, and you often have a focus on social change. In short, with your ideas and business models, you are contributing significantly to making the transition towards ecologically and socially just societies. Because this transition requires not only big money and big business, but also smart and small businesses as well. You are a key to such a transition. And that is why today's conference will be looking at how to promote young entrepreneurship in African countries. About 14 young entrepreneurs exchanged and shared their views and ideas on this issue yesterday. Together, they developed recommendations for action, and I'm looking forward to hearing about what you need in order to realize your ideas, grow your businesses, and create jobs. Your proposals will be included in our work. For instance, when the German Development Ministry works with African and international partners to improve the environment for startups. This also includes improving access to financial services and promoting collaboration between businesses, incubators, chambers of commerce, and higher education institutions. We will also take up your proposals in developing our funding programs further. For instance, in the context of Develop PPP venture program, which currently provides funding and advisory services for young entrepreneurs in Ghana, in Kenya, in Nigeria, and in Tanzania. Yesterday, at the Compact West Africa Summit, I had the pleasure to announce that we will also be supporting the emerging startup sectors in Rwanda and Côte d'Ivoire in the future. This program specifically targets business models that promote the transition towards the social ecologically economy. It supports young people in identifying solutions to local and global challenges and developing them further so they are ready for the market. Your experience and expertise can help us become even better at that. By the way, there is another reason why your expertise plays an important role. I see that in your group of about 40 young entrepreneurs and supporters of innovation, the share of women and men is very balanced, and I'm extremely pleased about that. Because women-led startups tend to rely more on social and sustainable business models. They drive innovations in sectors that are important for society, such as education or health. And we need that in order to bring about ecological and social change. As societies, we cannot afford to do without the ideas and the skills of half of the population, and this goes for both Africa and Europe. And that is why we are focusing our support on women-led startups and young businesses that promote gender equality. Ladies and gentlemen, this conference brings together policymakers, the business sector, academia, and civil society with the aim of creating a more conducive environment for startups to promote young entrepreneurship that is so urgently needed by connecting local and global, big and small businesses, new entrepreneurs and experienced ones. As the Development Ministry, we strive to mobilize more investment for startups and facilitate access to customized financing options for them. And we want to strengthen institutions that supports entrepreneurs, and that makes it easier for them. We want to support you in developing African solutions, both for Africa and for tackling the global challenges of our time. For this, one thing is crucial: listening to you in order to learn from you. And that is why we are here today. Thank you very much for joining us here. Thank you.
What energy, what energy. Unfortunately, I need to keep you up here on stage. And actually, what's going to happen now, and bear with us, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to bring up 36 wonderful young people that are not just promising, that they're already fulfilling their promises. And you're all going to be witness to that. And we're also going to see them in a film displayed. So, ladies and gentlemen, everybody who has been at the workshop yesterday, please do come up on stage. I know that you rehearsed it yesterday, except without the minister. Minister, center stage, everybody comes up and... Okay, can we get a thumbs up? One thumbs up. Yeah, great. Okay, if the photographer is happy, we are also happy, and everybody, including the minister, but the 4 people that we need for the next session are invited to step down now. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Grand job. Everybody's on the pictures, and looking at everybody who's got their mobiles out, of course, that is about Digital Europe. We're going to be showing a lot of the pictures on social media. Not jumping down, just jumping up. Great. Okay, so we have 4 young people, and just let me quickly explain. Yesterday there was a big workshop. These 36 young entrepreneurs put their heads together. They had a process, and they worked out policy recommendations. And as you can see, we take them very, very seriously. However, of course, we need to know what they are. So these 4 are already waiting, but you're going to have a very special moderator. And with a lot of applause, I'd like to bring up on stage Mavis Owusu-Gyamfi. And when she's not working as a moderator, she's actually got a sort of a paying job. I hope it's paying. Anyway, Mavis is Executive Vice President of the African Center for Economic Transformation in Accra, headquartered, but with a number of offices around the world, including the US. Maybe we can have one in Berlin here. Yeah, let's talk about that later. And ladies and gentlemen, Mavis is going to take over. If you need me, I'll be there for you. And everybody here has ideas about the 4 topics that were discussed. You're going to introduce these fantastic young people. And once the conversation is finished, I'm actually allowed to step down. Okay, that's me done.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Whilst a number of you were busy at the high-level panel yesterday, I had the incredible privilege of spending the day with the 36 young people that are here today. And we only see 4 of them speaking on behalf of all of them. But what I wanted to do was start with a quick round of introductions. So I will ask each of our 4 representatives of the group to briefly tell us a bit about their company. And I want you to tell me one key takeaway you had from yesterday. So I'd like to start with you, Edvige Takasi. Can you tell us a bit about Wi-Fi Africa Consulting and your takeaway from yesterday?
Yes, good morning, everybody. Wi-Fi Consulting is Women in Financial Inclusion. Africa Consulting, and we specialize in financial inclusion with a specific focus on women. I'm a banker turned entrepreneur, so I know how bankers think and I know how entrepreneurs think. And my biggest takeaway from yesterday was actually I was very surprised to see the little faith that young entrepreneurs have today in the formal banking sector. And at the same time, I was very positively struck by their willingness to be part of the solution. So it was sort of mixed feelings yesterday.
Fantastic, thank you. So the good news is we are concerned, but we are being solution-oriented, which is excellent.
Exactly.
So our next panelist is Maurice Ni Eje Chasinko. If I get it wrong, I'm in trouble because he's Ghanaian, so I had to make sure I got the name right. Maurice, could you tell us a bit about Illuminate Africa?
Yeah, thank you. So good to be here. Illuminate Africa is an accelerator and a fund to support entrepreneurs, scale-up entrepreneurs in Africa, specifically Ghana. We're looking at climate action. We're looking at green tech and agri-tech to invest in them, basically. So that's what we do, provide technical training for them and business and mentorship support throughout the entire process. For me, yesterday was a bit exciting, especially when I saw the Chancellor come visit us. Most often than not, you hardly find leaders of that caliber come down to the youth to interact with us. To have someone leave the summit to come to us and interact with us was a big takeaway for me. It means that the older people are still listening to us, so we're excited.
That's excellent. And my takeaway on the Chancellor's visit is his patience on taking selfies with so many of them. That was wonderful. So next, Ashton Imberry. Ashton, do you want to tell me us a bit about Polycycle Innovation and your takeaway?
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So Polycycle Innovations is into waste management. Mostly we focus on making construction materials from waste plastic. That is, our main goal is reducing waste plastic in the environment, at the same time providing affordable and sustainable construction materials for our customers. So for me yesterday, the key takeaway was that even though we all have different challenges for our different businesses, but you find that in Africa, there are certain issues that are the same for everyone. And I think that's what we all discussed yesterday.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. So we have similar issues, which means One Africa can work together to solve those challenges together. Thank you. So Hidia Ayadi, sorry. Tell us a bit about Shartoon. Did I? Scartoon. Tell us a bit about Scartoon and your takeaway from yesterday.
Thank you, Mavis, and it's a huge honor to be here today with you guys. I'm from Tunisia, and Scartoon, actually, I'm going to start by giving you a bit of an information. Did you know that 1 in 5 children have a learning difficulty? Dyslexia, ADHD, you name it. 1 in 2 of them are not being detected, leading to that 35% of children younger than 12 years old in Africa and the Middle East are leaving the schools. Well, actually, we're here to save them. We help detect, link them with therapists, and digitalize the full process using the only thing that kids love, video games. My take from yesterday was that Africa has 54 countries, more than 200 languages, and all entrepreneurs, we spoke the same language, speaking solutions, problems, and innovation.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. They deserve a round of applause. Excellent. So we heard earlier on from Secretary Schultz about the power of young Africans in innovating, in driving change. And we have 36 of them in this room today. But those individuals also recognize that they are operating in a challenging ecosystem. So yesterday they spent a lot of time working through solutions for those challenges within the ecosystem. And they looked at 4 areas. So I would like to now ask each of them to tell us about the one challenge you deep dived into and what your tangible recommendations are to the policymakers in this room. And remember, in this room, you have the head of the African Development Bank. Power, money, okay? Power. You have a minister speaking and representing other ministers, power, change. Think about that. And you have a bilateral development minister. I mean, in a room, honestly, you couldn't get better than that, okay? policy, people like us, we just write policies. These are the real change agents. So when you are giving your recommendations, think about that one. So I'd like to begin with you. No, they're ready. They're ready. They are dealing with some tough issues. They are ready to handle the leadership in the room. So, Hidiat, do you want to start with your challenge?
Yeah,
and
thank
your
you.
recommendations?
Thank you. Obviously, I work in education, so I'm focused on education. The challenge that we faced is that there is a really mixed match between what the businesses in green sectors and green sectors in general, technology sectors, are missing the skills, and the educational system is not providing those skills. So we proposed 3 solutions. Let's start with young kids. Let's teach them about green and sustainable energies and businesses from a young age by giving them access to it in schools and in all kinds of education. Let's move up to TVETs. Let's bring up skills. Let's reduce the bad image that we have about TVETs and create the next generation of skills that these businesses need. And thirdly, let's force job in placement. Let's have businesses give those TVET candidates and those technicians and engineers places and create jobs to help boost the green energy and the green businesses and sustainable businesses a chance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hidiat. So for the business people in this room, I know that by the time you leave, you'll be thinking about the job placement opportunities in your companies for young business people, for those of you in Africa. But we don't mind secondments too. We are pretty flexible. So I'd now like to go to Maurice.
Great. I was with the Networks and Partnerships group. We've identified our challenges as one, a lack of information, access to information by entrepreneurs in the ecosystem. We also have realized that policymakers also have gaps in understanding the local ecosystem that they operate in. And then finally, most of the IDFs that work in Africa work on the short-term projects, which doesn't necessarily help with the sustenance of the ecosystem going forward. So we're proposing that we want to have a one-stop shop, like a platform, a cloud community platform, where everybody is integrated and is on the platform. There's a network connecting entrepreneurs, policymakers, funders, and capacity builders together to be able to interact and share ideas, and network business, have opportunities to interact together. Basically, that's what we're looking at doing.
Thank you. And my next person is Advijay.
Right.
Advij.
So as I mentioned, I'm a banker turned entrepreneur. So obviously we looked at the access to finance issues, and we framed it as the main problem being the lack of adaptive, risk-adjusted finance solution for startups in Africa. So we know there's finance, but it doesn't go to those who need it the most. And this is caused by gaps between the operational realities of those startups on one hand, and then the policies of the financiers in general, whether they are bankers, microfinance institutions, or other. And in terms of solutions, we think that it would be important to turn around the way financial solutions are made so that there's a bottom-up design of innovative, maybe less conventional financing solution that could be blended finance instruments. But more importantly, we want this to include less conventional actors. And that could include African business angels, but also other actors. And we would like that this includes also sources like remittances to Africa. We know this is a big chunk of the development. And we think that digital solution can also help bridging the gap. And the one thing that came up very strongly yesterday was the need for very strong accountability. So when we have programs that work, then they should be scaled. When there are actors that fail, then they should probably be even punished or at least sidelined. So this came very, very strongly yesterday. So it's important to have accountability. And we want that the financiers are able to work with those more agile actors, and that they are also able to bring in independent expertise for this accountability side.
Okay, fantastic. And now, Ashton, I'm going to come back to each of them to probe a bit more, but I'd like to come to you, Ashton.
All right, thank you. So I was with the legal and regulatory framework group. And the main challenge we noticed with Africa is the lack of whole-of-government strategy in policy development. mainly compounded by the fact that there's insufficient involvement of young entrepreneurs in the policy development of most of our countries. So we came up with two solutions. The first is to create a policy-making body that is inclusive of all stakeholders, that are young entrepreneurs, women, entrepreneurs with disabilities, incubators and accelerators, and of course, government players. So by involving all these diverse actors, we ensure that there is an inclusive involvement and a holistic approach to policy development, because we are dealing with people who know the challenges they're facing and what they need. The second solution we came up with is creating an young entrepreneur-led organization that actively engages governments and development agencies such as BMZ to develop policies and also discuss the policies that are in place. By this, we ensure that the policies that are developed and created certainly benefit those who want to use them. So from all this, we expect that there will be policies and laws that significantly boost most of our businesses in Africa and create jobs.
Thank you. So we have enough time for me to come back for a second round of questions. So Hidiat, on the education and capacity space, you talked a bit about rebranding TVET.
Yes.
Okay. And I think there's general consensus in the world that TVET is going to be very important for green and sustainable jobs on the continent. Could you maybe give us more tangible ways in which we could rebrand TVET and make it less of a secondary choice for families and more of a primary choice for families?
Of course, of course. I'm going to take the example of Tunisia, for example. TVETs are for us the failure school, the school where kids that do not have good grades or fail at school go to TVETs. Let's rebrand that. Let's give them examples of people that went through TVET, had success stories, had businesses, are successful in their lives. Let's change the mindset of teachers. Let's give them workshops to understand that TVET is another kind of education. Traditional education isn't the only way for people to succeed in their lives. So let's help the teachers understand that so that they can teach the parents, the kids, and everyone around them. And especially, let's show the parents that if your child doesn't get an A plus or B plus at school, it doesn't mean that he is not understanding what he's doing. It means that he has a specific skill that we need to harness, because these are the future engineers and technicians. So these are the actions that we can do. And these actions can be taken by ministries, by us people, by startups, especially since, as Ghartoun, this is what we're doing in Tunisia.
Thank you. So, Maurice, I'd like to come back to you. There are a lot of platforms, lots of ecosystems, lots of partnerships. Yeah. We talk a lot about these things. What is it about your proposed solution that is unique?
Great. So we want to, we don't want to set up another network. There are several networks, right? We want to leverage on existing networks, because we realized that the tangibility of a network is business. There has to be a proposition that makes sense to everybody on the platform. Mm-hmm. It's demand and supply, right? It should be a platform where everybody has access to value and is willing to join, and across the ecosystems on the continent. For instance, we also realized that in most of the solutions for Africa, it's project-based solutions. Mm. So 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, it's done. We have our reports, we come back, we are happy. But then those on the ground have issues with sustainability. Mm. So we are looking at long-term projects. So for our IDF partners that are here today, when you are structuring projects for Africa, it shouldn't just be a 6 months, a 1 year, a 2 year project, but you're looking at a long-term project that can sustain itself even in your absence. And that's what we're looking at. So the network is supposed to be an existing platform that is already there, leveraging on it, finding a value access model for everybody. It can even be a business model for entrepreneurs to even take advantage of. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're looking at promoting from our group. Thank you.
I like that a lot. So basically, you're creating a platform, but you're not creating it as a development project. You're creating it as a business.
Yes.
I like that. Okay. Advij, I am always fascinated. So, you know, as a microeconomist, I spent my life studying how businesses happen and how economies grow. And if you study North America, you study Europe, you look at Asia, you look at China, the power of angel investors sits at the heart of what builds these economies. So how can we take the emerging power of angel investors in Africa? I want you to drill down a bit on that recommendations for us.
Okay, so the bottom line yesterday in the discussion is that we have the feeling that there's a missing middle, no? So there's a lot happening at the microfinance stage, there's a lot happening at the corporate stage, but then there's a missing middle. And what we found out in the discussion is that beyond the classical bankers, there are also actors on the ground that develop quite some knowledge and quite some risk awareness on the businesses that are being created and growing. And the strength that they have is that they function in a way that allows failure. So an angel investor would think out of 10 investments, maybe 8 will fail. But what I learned about the 8 that fail is so valuable that I'm prepared to invest this money. So the money lost is not considered as loss, but it's an investment. And so that's the bottom line of our ideas. It might not be just the angel investors. There are other actors that are also think this way. But what we want is that in the general development programs that have to do with financing startups, we should bring in actors that are prepared to go back to the drawing board and then design their approach in that way. That failure should not be considered as your death penalty and then you will never again access any finance, but it should be part of your process.
Okay. Okay, brilliant. You know, I recently read a report that said that most African countries actually have tax rebates for development projects, for businesses. Could we look at something like that for angel investors? So if as part of your loss of investing in 10 to find, because what we're looking for is we're looking for these angel investors to develop the next Dangote or whatever the next big business is. It could be in this room, by the way. You know, our next Dangotes and large business. Oh, it is in this room. I like that, Maurice. It is in this room. I'm liking that. I'm liking that a lot. So remember those of us in development when you make it? Yeah? I just wanted to come back to you, Ashton. You know, we always bring young people to platforms. We say we are consulting. We say you are engaging. We are doing all of this. Yet your recommendation is very focused on bringing young people into a set-up system. Why? What is going to be different from what you are proposing from what we are doing right now?
All right, thank you. Right now we are discussing, right? In most of our discussions in here, they are just mere ideas. So what we propose is the actual implementation of these policies and these bodies. Because once we do this, we can actually make sure that this body regularly interacts with all these stakeholders. Secondly, we make sure that there is a policy tracking platform to ensure that these policies are being developed and met, and that the goals that they set are actually being met. And then the third is actually to continuously review these policies to make sure that we are not just setting policies and then leaving them for the next person who comes into the position and make new policies. So that is what we are suggesting.
Thank you. So I'm going to come back to all of you again. So, Hadiat, you talked about the importance of job placements as one of your recommendations. But we have a lot of job placement schemes, okay? How is this recommendation going to make any difference? In fact, I think, if I remember yesterday, somebody said, they take us in, they tick a box, they kick us out, we're still unemployed. So how is this going to make a difference, your proposal?
Actually, what we're proposing is, you're talking with startups. Startups look for investments. Why not force through investment that you won't have this part of the investment until you recruit X number of people? Why not ask startups and businesses to work in collaboration with the vets, form them, and then place them within their companies? And not just place them for 6 months, 1 year, until you have all the information about them and then you kick them out. No, you have to keep them. You have to keep working with them. And that's what we're asking for. We're asking investors to put a condition. You want my investment? You have to have X number of people placed into your company using the funds that I'm going to give to you. And this is how we have efficient and optimistic solutions, let's say.
I like that. I like that. So as you're thinking of the conditions for investment, you are thinking about skill development, market development, etc. going forward. I like
Exactly.
that. I like that a lot. So back to you, Maurice. I'm always taken aback when we talk about partnerships, networks, systems, etc. We are very good at building them in silos. So we have the fintech network, we have the economics network, we have the IT network, we have the agriculture network. And all those networks are complicated anyway, yet your platform aims to bring them all together. How do you navigate those complexities in your solution?
Good question. Again, with all these sector networks, there's one common language, business. It's commerce. You're buying or you're selling, someone is buying, no matter what you're doing, right? And even in buying and selling, you still need certain systems in place. You need infrastructure, you need policy. You need systems that make things easy for you to be able to interact with one another, even within your sector. So what we're trying to do basically is that tech is not isolated, it's an enabler. You will find that in every ecosystem, there's the need for an enabling technology to bring the systems together, right? So our platform basically is looking at, for instance, you look at the policy makers, right? We usually say in African countries that our parliamentarians don't necessarily understand what we're trying to do and because most of them don't have some of the information. So we're saying that, okay, we have a platform, an existing network platform. These are the things that young people are saying in these sectors. What do you have in your budget in the year to support something like that, right? It can be, we may not have the opportunity to come to Parliament to have that discussion, but on the platform you get to see, you can contribute, right? So it doesn't matter who it is and what sector it is that they're working on. It's a platform that everybody else can have a conversation and have real-time information about what exactly they need and how to get it done.
I like that. So you learn in real time, and you can't use the excuse that I don't have this information because the information is available to you. I like that a lot. So, Edwige, I feel like access to finance is one of those things that we have been debating for years. In fact, I actually wrote my thesis on access to finance. Yeah, it feels like we've been at this thing for a long time. Yet we are struggling to crack that secret code. So how, in your recommendations, will we crack that code? You talked a lot about, we seem to have figured out how to deal with large businesses. We've kind of dealt with micro businesses, but that missing middle is still very much missing. How do we crack that nut?
Yesterday in the discussion, I asked myself how this was done in Europe. Because in the end, you know, access to finance, as you said, is a universal problem. And as I understand, in Europe and elsewhere, for specific sectors that need to be pushed, there are programs that are set maybe for a time frame, but with specific incentives. No? So if we take culture, or if we take agriculture, or if we take specific sectors that are perceived as having higher risk for the standard banking sector, that would come with, you know, the ratios and regulator issues and all those things, you would have some sort of framework that would give them some sort of permission to do things differently. And I think we haven't been taking that into account enough in our countries. We have this romantic idea that because there's a potential, then the banker should understand that this is business. But it's a big shortcut. We do need to take into account that, you know, every year there's Basel 1, Basel 2, Basel 3, and very soon Basel 4, Basel 5. And the bankers, they need to abide by those rules as well. So the question is, how do we give them specific frameworks that are maybe a bit separate from what they report to their shareholders and that give them permission to take the risks until those specific frameworks are no longer needed. And that's really why yesterday we were having in mind less conventional, maybe actors that could be working with the standard banking sector, bringing in new ideas, so that we create also new recipes. The old recipes won't work.
Okay, so... So you are proposing that we are more intentional in terms of making recommendations when it comes to that missing middle. But we have been intentional. We have development banks. Why are you laughing?
AFDB. AFDB.
Why are you laughing? We have development banks.
Development bank still need to work through intermediaries,
Okay.
no? So they can't do the work directly. They don't deal directly with the end entrepreneur. And those intermediaries, we go back to the classical banking sector, banks, microfinance institutions, et cetera, et cetera. And the regulator comes at some point asking what is put in place in terms of risk management. So it seems that we are within the same conversation asking one thing and the opposite, and we need to find a way to sort of put it in a separate way until this can be reconciled again. And that's a little bit this idea of having separate programs, sandbanks, whatever we want to call them, so that we can take care of our startups.
So we are looking for a framework that enables us to take risks without the regulators penalizing the banks for risks and losses.
It's a way of putting it. I know the regulator will always have their role to play, but maybe they can be given a different types of roles for those specific vehicles, and those vehicles should not be monitored the same way as, standard banking.
Okay. Thank you. And I don't think it's a silly suggestion at all, because if you look at how, Europe was rebuilt after the war, a lot of those suggestions came through. So we need to think of similar solutions for Africa. I agree with you. So back to you, Ashton. I'm always frustrated when we talk about legal and regulatory reform, because we have a plethora of legal and regulatory reform. In fact, at Asset, we do a lot of analysis. And every time we look at the analysis, we are shocked at how good our regulations are. Okay? We have really good regulations. In fact, we call Ghana the School of Good Regulations and Policies. Come and learn how to write a good regulation. Okay? But then implementation becomes a challenge. How will your recommendation move us closer towards better implementation?
All right, that's a good question. All right, first of all, I'm not a developer or a politician. So I don't know what you consider.
But you're a business. You're a business person and you experienced it.
So I actually wanted to suggest sometimes what you call a good regulation to developers and maybe regulators might not be a good regulation to the people who are actually on the ground.
Ouch! That's a great point. Thank you.
So Africa is mostly run by the informal sector. Let's take mining, for example. Most mining maybe is illegal, yes, because there are regulations and legal laws that do not allow miners to do certain activities. So in the end, it becomes a game of cat and mouse. Let's say the authorities come and tell you what you're doing is illegal. And you say, okay, I'm going on. You go on to the next site, to another mine. They come there again. You do the same thing. And what we are actually avoiding the problem. Asking them, okay, what do you need for us to be able to make your work legal? I think that is the main missing link. Okay. Yes, the people who are making the policies, to me, it's my personal opinion, so I'm not sure, are not really consulting the entrepreneurs. I think that's why we suggested creating these bodies that include all these.
Okay, so form should follow function, not the other way around.
Yes.
Okay, that's helpful. But it's really hard to hear that. Because you are right. Not many of us regulators have actually been business people. Yeah. So you have a point. You have a point there. Yeah, okay, so enough of the grilling. Are you convinced by their recommendations so far? Fantastic. So if you're convinced by their recommendations, I'm going to ask each of our young entrepreneurs a question. You have some real decision makers in this room. okay? We want to know that they've heard you and they've taken these recommendations seriously. So I want each of you to pick one or two individuals in the front row, this corner, this end, look at this end, yeah? Which one? This end. So start with Birgit all the way to, don't ask me, yeah, just up to here, okay? And I want each of you to say, on Monday morning, when they walk into their offices, what action they should take to give you confidence that they've heard you today. Ashton.
All right. Maybe my recommendation or question is to Dr. Rania. What I want for you to do on Monday is to actually, when you get into the office, call your peer ministers and ask them, hey, I met with these young entrepreneurs in Berlin, and they suggested that we create collaborative platforms to include entrepreneurs and all stakeholders in our policy making. Let's do this by this and this date. I will actually be communicating with my sister Riam in Egypt to see if it has been implemented.
Love it.
That was a good one.
Advice.
I think my recommendation will go to Ms. Pickle. I would love on Monday you to call the relevant departments in charge of, designing programs for the financial sector in Africa and ask them how they intend to include the less conventional actors. And in case they're not able to answer this question, you could ask them to then think about how to write a concept note on a new type of program. And they should not hesitate in, calling up those that are on the ground that could give them the relevant information in terms of investment that is done on a less conventional way. I think EBAN, the Association of African Business Angels, is one. It's not the only one, but I think there's enough experience and intelligence on the ground to get a good concept note written.
Okay.
Wow.
And Secretary Schultz and Ms. Pickle, next time I meet, I will ask and I'll email her. Maurice.
I think this goes to Mr. Adesina.
A doctor.
Doctor, sorry.
Doctor. Say it properly, doctor.
Dr. Adesina. I have heard about the Young Entrepreneurs Investment Banking Initiative, and I think that is great. I heard it was launched somewhere, the initiative was launched somewhere last year. But my recommendation to you is that I know you have offices across the continent, and I want it to be as loud as possible and convince the governments to be behind it as soon as possible. I'm going back to Ghana on the 30th. By the 1st of December, I want to be able to walk into an office and be directed as to what to do to access the Young Entrepreneurship Bank initiative. Thank you very much.
Well, there's a lot of recommendations I would love to say, and a lot of asks I would love to do, but first and foremost, it's for Dr. Adesina. Hi. I'm an entrepreneur that raised a couple of funds and still raising. And what I would ask you is, on Monday morning, you would call your teams and ask them to put conditions on the funds that you will put in these entrepreneurs. Ask us as entrepreneurs to partner with TVET schools, to hire more people, to use your funds not to make our salaries 10 times bigger, but to hire the good people that are going to help our businesses grow. And I will be asking for investment from you guys very soon. So I would love to see that.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you have enjoyed listening from our fantastic young entrepreneurs. I always get excited when I spend time with all of you because I know my future is in good hands and my pension is reasonably safe. So, on behalf of everyone here, I'd like to say a very big thank you to Maurice, Edwige, Hidiat, and Ashton. I just had a mental block. It's old age, forgive me.
No.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Well, Mavis, gentlemen, ladies, Adiet, Ashton, Maurice, and Edwige, thank you so much for a very entertaining way to present some very serious recommendations, and I'm quite sure we're going to pick up on that in the panel discussion in a moment. And it sounds like you've got your homework already cut out. You know, a lot to do till Monday morning. But it's not Monday morning yet. We are going to have an intervention by somebody, and really, I actually expect an angel to look slightly different, except that I think the series Lucifer has an angel in it that could be like you. Our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, is an angel investor. I've already said that. Actually, I think a number of the issues that we've just heard will be picked up in one way or another, reflected from a different point of view. And of course, everybody who's looked at the QR code can look at the proper bio. But I happen to actually listen to your TED Talk. And whilst this is, again, social media, you can actually tell that you, ladies and gentlemen, are in for a great 15 minutes because our next speaker, Kola Aina, is actually somebody who lives his dream. In your TED Talk, you said you don't want to dance to somebody else's music, you want to dance to your own. And he's actually created the environment for himself. Having worked for a number of big companies, he said, no, I'm going to put into action what I thought. That's more than a decade ago. And I believe on the way, Minister, if you have to leave, we regret it very much, but we know that you have a full day. So could you just, on the way, quickly give her a big round of applause for having been here, for having instigated it with your team. So, Kola, maybe you'd already come up on stage so that everybody knows what I'm talking about. Now, isn't this a beautiful angel? Absolutely fantastic. Kola, just one quick, so let me just do the honors. You've been a serial entrepreneur, you are a serial investor, you've created platforms, so already taking in one of the issues that we've just heard, you were actually sort of providing a platform for educating students much easier. And when I said you live your dream, today you probably have all these companies in good hands. You've actually brought around about 100 to life. 70 are really alive and kicking. Some of them really, really doing well. So thank you very much for that. The only thing that we need to solve is how can we sort of copy you and replicate you and get one into each and every country. Ladies and gentlemen, as I said, lean back, enjoy the ride. And I know that you have a bitter pill at the end, but I think sometimes we need to look at reality in order to improve it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, everyone. It is such an honor to be with you here this morning. My name is Kola Aina. I'm a retired entrepreneur and operator, like most of the young people that were on stage, who's now an investor and ecosystem builder. I started off as an angel investor, but I now run a venture capital fund that's invested in companies like the ones on stage across the continent. I thought that was just fantastic. I'm not sure what else I have to say, but I'll try to expand on some of the concepts that the young people, my colleagues that were on stage, just talked about. It's such an honor to be here. Thank you very much. So, you've all heard the news. Rising inflation across some countries in the continent, a return of coups, unfortunately, FX devaluation in Nigeria, Egypt, and Kenya. But that's not why I'm here. Africa stands at a pivotal moment. growth that is powered by youth is just around the corner. This growth is rooted in very strong fundamentals. And I don't need to tell you more. You just saw what is possible on stage. We have a vibrant and growing youthful population. You've got rising GDP across a number of African countries, and you have poverty levels that are dropping in some countries. The continent's youth, empowered by education and technology advancements and internet penetration, are driving this change. This change heralds a digital entrepreneurship and global future that will power the growth and the jobs we need to see across the continent. In Nigeria, for instance, internet penetration has grown 4x from 2010 to 2023. The youthful population of Africa will lead the world by 2050. But as Africa grows, the cost of this growth must be sustainable, both for Africa and for the rest of the world. The existing infrastructural gaps that may seem to be challenges are actually an opportunity for Africa to adopt a sustainable net zero approach from the outset, particularly as you think about energy, industrial processes, and social infrastructure. The architects of Africa's future are its young innovators. For instance, some of you might have heard about a young man called Shola Akinlade, who founded a company called Paystack. When I met Shola in 2016, all he needed was about $100,000. I was fortunate to have the good sense to invest $50,000. The rest, as they say, is history. Before Shola launched Paystack, you couldn't process a payment online. Think about that for a moment in 2016. So if you wanted to buy an airline ticket, you had to pay the money in the bank account of the airline at the bank. Today, Paystack supports over 300,000 merchants and small businesses across the continent. Empowered by technology, which is a great equalizer, as we all know, these young people are creating solutions for everyday challenges, like making payments online. To maximize this impact, they require not just more capital, but support systems that power their vision. And this support includes capital, like has just been said on stage, talent, as well as supporting policy and frameworks that can catalyze their growth. However, Africa's development and growth is not an isolated journey. It has significant implications for the rest of the world. Today, Africa's contribution to climate change mitigation is quite notable, with just 4% of global carbon emissions, despite comprising 17% of the world's population. On top of that, improving economic opportunities within Africa, including scaling some of the businesses that you've met here today, could influence migration patterns across the world, a point of relevance for Europe. In essence, Africa's progress is a shared global issue, impacting trade, impacting economic, environmental efforts, as well as migration trends across the world. The more of these unicorns that we can build in Africa, the more likely young Africans have opportunity to remain on the continent. As of February 2023, there were 7 unicorns across the continent, companies valued at over $1 billion. Most of them are in my home country, Nigeria, but I'm very proud to say you have them in Egypt, you have them across the continent as well. Unfortunately, most of the innovation that exists today targets consumption. But the reality is that Africa is replete with non-consumption. If you travel from Egypt all the way to the shanties in Cape Town, all you see are young Africans desperate to consume education, to consume healthcare, to consume high-quality opportunities. That must change. On top of that, we all know that African governments alone will struggle to transform their economies without creating new markets. But they just can't spend enough to create these markets. This is why we need the private sector to step in. And that's why my organization, Ventures Platform, has been focused in investing in these young entrepreneurs that are building market-creating innovations across the continent. Over the last 7 years, we've invested in over 100 companies, with over 70 of them actively building companies and scaling their impact today. Our focus is investing in market-creating innovations. And that's what Africa needs to do more of. I talked about Paystack already. Today, from humble beginnings of less than $1 million in total venture capital raised, Paystack has created over 200 high-quality jobs across Africa, with team members in Egypt and Nigeria and other parts of the continent. They even have team members in Dubai. Paystack today powers over 300,000 merchants, enabling a young lady in Cairo, for instance, to sell her goods to a global audience. Take Noto in South Africa, probably the first digital credit bureau in Africa that's licensed by the regulators. Noto today powers over 34,000 users, enabling daily income earners get access to home mortgages. Today, Noto has processed over 150,000 credit checks. Take PiggyVest, probably one of my favorite portfolio companies. PiggyVest started by 4 young people that just got out of a university outside Lagos. PiggyVest today has 4 million users, enabling young people gain access to high-yield savings instruments. PiggyVest employs 130 people, mostly women. And then Termite. If you use any social media platform today, anywhere in Africa, the messaging that you get for your OTP is likely powered by Termite. Termite today powers over 70 million messages, ensuring that young Africans can remain connected to the world via social media platforms. There's so much more where that's come from. But the youth of Africa are not only building startups to help you make payments or help you get your OTP to log into Facebook. They're also powering the just transition, or call it a transition if you like. Take a company like Fez. Fez, started by a young lady who worked in the financial sector, is today building a last-mile delivery infrastructure that ensures that people can get critical things delivered in record time. But Fez is doing that using electric-powered motorcycles, ensuring that we do less damage to the environment. Sunfi. The founders of Sunfi, when we met them a few years ago, were installing solar panels all across the western coast, from Lagos to Accra and to other countries around the continent. But they realized that the real struggle, if you really wanted to give Africans access to renewable energy that wasn't a little pay-go lamp or something to charge your mobile phone, because Africans deserve much more than that. They realized that the real way you unlock that opportunity is by solving the financing problem. The capex to access solar panels is simply too high for the average African. And so they started a new company called Sunfi that today is a marketplace for accessing the financing you need to get on solar panels. An incredible company. There is so much more from where that's come. Across our portfolio, our companies have created an excess of 10,000 jobs. So yes, startups can create jobs, as my friend just said on the stage. 10 of our portfolio companies have valuations in excess of $100 million. This is really sustainable, guys. We have 5 exits already. In other words, we've invested and we've seen money come out on the other end because this has to be done sustainably. And our impact is spreading across the continent. And so what lies ahead? Looking forward, as an ecosystem seated in this room, we must collectively work really hard to deepen our impact, investing in more companies started by young people. But we must be selective. We must back companies that are focused on the critical themes of market creation, because that's what Africa needs, gender equity, ensuring that more women-led companies are invested in, job creation, and climate sustainability. The capital that we deploy on the continent must be focused on key priority areas. This ambition is part of a broader agenda that includes the work of organizations like ABAN, organizations like the Lagos Angel Network, the Cario Angels Network, the Dakar Angels Network, and venture funds across the continent, led by indigenous Africans who understand the challenges on the continent. There's so much more that needs to be done, but it must be done collaboratively. I would be remiss to leave this stage without emphasizing a very sore point. We have achieved a lot as an ecosystem. However, the pace of change must accelerate. In 2022, Africa attracted less than 1% of global venture capital. 1%, guys. So all of the noise that I'm making here on stage and all of the folks that have been talking, it's all less than 1%. Much more must be done to catalyze the entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem across the continent. But look, there's reason to cheer and be happy. Adventures Platform, at the heart of our progress, has been collaboration with organizations like Africa Grow, supported by the German government, who have made an investment in us that allows us catalyze some of the progress that I've talked about here today. I believe it's day one, and there's so much more for us to do. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks.
Kola, thank you so much. I'm not going to let you go, but please don't be irritated. There are going to be a couple of chairs coming, so we're almost in the transition to the panel discussion. And I was just intrigued because when you mentioned 7 unicorns in Africa, mostly sort of, done into the Nigerian context, but spreading also to make that a bit more relatively.
Unicorn
1,360 unicorns around the world.
Around the world, yes.
So
yes.
there is still sort of, a little bit of room for growth.
Correct.
And as I said, we can't have too many of you. On the other hand, what are you looking at to identify? I'm quite sure that you have hundreds and hundreds of proposals.
Yep.
But what are you looking at? How do you know this is the right setup, not just a business plan, but what do you look at when you say, these are the people that we're going to get finance to, but also your help?
Great question. So last year, at first look, we evaluated over 1,700 pitch decks. We wish we could fund all these companies, but because we are managing capital that's entrusted to us as a venture capital fund, capital return is critical. And so our funding strategy focuses on 4 key criteria. We're early stage investors, and so we are focused on the quality of the founding team. What's the ambition like? What's the level of commitment? And what's the experience that the team has to tackle this problem? The second thing that we focus on is really the size of the market. Because to deliver a venture capital return, you need to address a very large and potentially growing market, which is why the thesis that we have focused on market-creating innovations is really the way to go on the continent. The third thing that we look at is the quality of the product. For a VC-backed company, you've got to be building a product that is at least 10 times better than the alternatives that exist. And we don't want companies that are building products just for Africa. We think that African entrepreneurs can build products that can be exported to the rest of the world. And I think the fourth thing that we look at is really not talked about as much. Companies require tailwinds. And so we very often want to see that the regulatory tailwinds exist. We want to see that the supporting infrastructure does exist as well, which is why we work very closely with governments and regulators to ensure all of that comes together so the entrepreneurs can perform magic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before I leave you on, 3 adjectives, again, about the people that you select.
Resilient, ambitious, and hardworking. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Kola.
Thank you.
Been a great pleasure. Thank you so much. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, magically, some chairs appeared here on stage. Thank you very much, team. And I'm now able to fill it up with our panelists, that some of which have already had some homework to do. But with a little bit of applause from your side, Dr. Rania Al-Mashad, Minister of International Cooperation from Egypt, could you please take the middle seat? Thank you so much. Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, the President of the African Development Bank, and I think the list of to-dos was already sort of like an armful. Would you please take that seat? Perfect. And Lassina Kone, Director General and CEO of Smart Africa. Thank you very much. On the other hand of the Minister. Normally, you drape the ladies around the gentlemen. So, no offense, definitely not. So, we're going to ask two other young entrepreneurs, and especially ladies. Audrey Estako, founder and CEO of Shaban Sake from Ghana. Maybe you take that space. And Maria Teresa Kadushi, Mobile Afia from Tanzania, to my side. Last but not least, the lady who has already been mentioned, who's already got a little bit of homework to do, Birgit Pickel, Director General Africa from the BMZ, i.e. from the Ministry. Now, before we sort of get to your homework, let's maybe sort of work out another couple of things. I mean, just one sentence. What you just heard now, and this has not been agreed in the prep discussions, but you just heard a number of aspects in 4 categories, but and you've all been around. So you've all been on many panel discussions. What did you think is new, and what do you think is actually maybe, of all the proposals that you've heard, quickly, easily to put into practice? And maybe, Rania, if I use your first name, it's okay, I hope. Yeah.
No, well, first I want to congratulate everyone that has been on stage, not just for their own startups, but for a very detailed understanding of the ecosystem and a very articulate way of conveying it to policymakers and to practitioners. But if I can summarize, it's policy and practice have to come hand in hand. And it's very important to push policies based on the practice that everyone has had. As I think this is one of the biggest. So if I can summarize in one word, platforms for policy and practice.
Sounds fantastic. Thank you very much. And let's keep it as short as that. Akinwumi, if I may ask you, again, long experience, some of the issues won't be new to you, but they might have had a new twist.
Well, you know, well, first, thank you, Mavis, for a great job, and all the panelists, all of you for what you do. Sitting here as President of the African Development Bank, the thing that comes to my mind is here we are in Europe, and I just want to say from what I've seen today and heard, the future of Africa's youth does not lie in Europe. It doesn't lie in America. It doesn't lie in Asia. It lies in Africa. And the kind of ideas, the kind of innovations, the kind of creativity, the kind of passion, the kind of drive that I see today is exactly what we must harness in Africa. And I think that, people talk quite a lot about the fact that we have a demographic dividend. Now, we have not just a demographic dividend, we have an innovation dividend, we have an entrepreneurship dividend, and that 1% that you're talking about in terms of, the amount of venture capital ought to be, let me say, 30, 40, 50%. And we're going to talk about that on the panel, but the hope of Africa is not in the future. From what I hear today, that hope is now.
Thank you. Mr. Kone, Lassina, again, CNN has featured your organization recently, and without connectivity, without Smart Africa, none of these ideas can be put into practice. So what was new? What is your take of what you heard?
Thank you very much for inviting us. It's really what I hear here in Momona is just it's the music to my ear. But two main takeaway. It's one of them, as my sister says here, it has to do with the policy. I call it now a word, regulation for development, not regulation for regulation. Countries compete today if they want a disruption. If you want a disruption, you need the regulation for development. For development in the regulation for startup, regulation for technology, regulation for finance, and all of that. And one other thing that we hear from the gentleman here, my brother, which is the market size, creating the market. That's what we are in. That's the reason Smart Africa was created, to transform Africa into a single digital market. You don't have startup targeting only Ghana for 30 million or Kenya, 50 million, Nigeria 220. You have a startup who can target 1.4 billion population. For that, you need a policy harmonization. And it's very interesting what we just saw here. 7 unicorn, I believe 6 out of them is fintech. Does that ring a bell? If the unicorn definition is any company valuations over $1 billion, and we have a 1.4 billion, it means if an African startup develops an application used by one person every day, how many unicorn we can have? Sky will be just the beginning. So it's not only, as Dr. Lassina says, not only demographic dividend, we have innovation dividend, we have a technology dividend, and I think that's what that's the takeaway from it. But the regulation for development is important. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I mean, this was just sort of a round that I slotted in as a quick and fast response. Mrs. Pickle, you may, but
I would like to listen to the ladies.
Well, I mean, they were working out the issues, so I'd like to come back to them in a moment when we're...
Okay, then now let me come in. Good morning, everyone. President Adesina, I mean, we've been working together for many, many years, and I think as partners, how do you, as a multilateral bank, with the regional development bank, sort of see how you can, maybe together with us, as Germany playing a strong role in the bank, really working on those partnerships and platforms that were mentioned here, because I think that is a key issue, really, there is so much energy and ideas. I mean, we've listened to this in this room, and Mavis, thanks for facilitating. So working on these platforms to really move these ideas forward, how can we together maybe make more impact there?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the great support that you provide to the African Development Bank. I think let me start from the fact of accountability first. The youth population that we have in Africa today, between the ages of 15 and 35, it's about 477 million people. Well, that means that what we do with that young population is going to determine the future of Africa's economy, but in fact, how we grow that economy now from all of what we've heard. And so for us, as Africa's premier financial institution, my number one responsibility is how to transform that demographic dividend into an economic dividend for Africa. And so that starts from where we put our money and how we do our strategies. So at the African Development Bank, we started off by actually creating a whole new strategy, jobs for youth in Africa. We have to. We can't have a situation with Africa's youth, 90% of them, they say, well, they're employed, but most of them are in informal sector. You know, we must be able to create decent quality, high quality jobs for our young people. So from the African Development Bank, we started with a strategy called Jobs for Youth in Africa, with our goal to help to create 25 million jobs by 2025, and also to skill up 50 million young people in all the things that we've heard about today, right? Skills, entrepreneurship, and all of the innovation and all of that. And we have started by actually saying all the things we do at the bank, and you are a shareholder of the bank, we have to make sure that the youth are considered. And we've done very, very well. Since we started our strategy in 2016, we've been able to create roughly about 15 million jobs, right? Because we do, out of our portfolio, almost $27 billion. Now, 5 million of those jobs are in the formal sector. Direct jobs, and 10 million are indirect jobs. But most important is the fact of what we actually do as part of that program. A key part of that thing is when we talk about the whole issue of transition. We talked about energy transition, right? We have something called Youth Adapt program. That Youth Adapt program is to support entrepreneurs like we've heard about today to deal with energy transitions and all of that. We give them, if you have a great idea, you can get $100,000 to be a pre-seed, and then you move on from there. That works very, very well. And I also want to say that one other thing that we've done, and I want to come back on that, if I can get her name, the lady who wants us to do more with the new menu, Edvish? Edvish. Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to say that one of the things that we are doing at the bank to respond to what you're talking about is the establishment of youth entrepreneurship investment banks. You see, when young people go to the banks, what do they see? They see people like myself with a cute dressed up in three-piece suit and all of that. They ask them, how old are you? You say, 21 years old. You say, well, go give me 40 years of your tax returns. How does that work? You know, they see young people as risk and not as assets. And so we decided that as a bank, we must put the capital of the bank at risk behind our young people. Because if we don't, Africa is already going to be at risk because of that. And so we're starting these new banks called Youth Entrepreneurship Investment Banks, new financial institutions that will create new ecosystems that will support young people and their businesses in a life cycle model. You start off with good technical assistance for them. They develop their businesses. You do mixes of debt and equity instruments in the life cycle of the business. You stay with them, right, throughout the life cycle of it. So what I'm trying to say is that the African Development Bank, the issue of young people, financial innovations to support them and to help them to unlock this huge potential, it's at the core of what we do. And the last thing I want to say, because you talk about platform, is I was, Mavis, impressed with what I had today. That I've decided, just sitting out there, it's one of my things I'm going to do is, you see the young people that were on this stage this morning, plus also Kola and others, I'll set up a high-level youth advisory committee to me as president of the bank to harness what is coming out of here. It's not just a Monday issue. It's not a Tuesday issue. It's a structural issue that we must make sure that we deal with. So I want to thank you all very, very much, but be assured that the bank strongly supports the youth of Africa because that's where our real wealth is. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Audrey and Mira, Theresia, could you just forgive me one more question to the minister, and then I'd like to have your experience. I'm not ignoring you. It's just that sort of my first question was not my first question. It was question 0. Rania, what are you actually doing in Egypt? Again, very young population. The youth aspect is very important, and all the issues that we've just heard as policy suggestions are something that you're tackling with as a government. How would you actually come to grips with it now? And the ideas that we've heard, are they already sort of are they already influencing future policy building?
Just a few points on the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Egypt. And I'll go back to maybe 2017. We were one of the first countries to put public money into a company that would bet on startups. It's called Egypt Ventures, so it was public money. The board is private sector led, And it was at a time when still this was a beginning of where we are today. Today, even though the 1% for all Africa, Egypt is the #1 within the continent when it comes to investments in startups, according to reports of 2022. So we took a risk very early on when it came to public money being put in a company led by the private sector to be able to grab this talent, create incubators. And today, when you take a look at many of the companies, they were coming out of Egypt Ventures. They were incubated in Falak, and then they moved on. Falak is one of Egypt's incubators, according to the company. So there is a conviction early on that we need to support this, but also a conviction that there's a difference between a startup and an SME. SMEs are quite different. They have their taxes and this and that, and there's a definition of what an SME is. We can sit down and debate it, but the central bank has a definition, and I don't know who has a definition, Ministry of Finance. Startups are very different, and you have to take a risk on many of them, and then there are a few that make it, and then the returns are very big. So this just goes back to where's the government on this? There was a conviction early on. Number two, it's not just about the financing, it's also about the technical assistance. It's about protecting, creating an environment where they are mentored, they are encouraged. There are many, and Riham is here, and others who are from the Middle East, Africa, where they see media, culture supporting this type of risk. It's no longer that if you fail, it's horrible. On the contrary, there's this awareness that the innovation dividend, the entrepreneurial dividend, is something that should be encouraged. The other point, as Ministry of International Cooperation, we deal with all development partners, the multilaterals, African Development, World Bank, IFC, etc., and then the bilaterals, Germany, US, etc. And there are 3 words that define our relationship and our strategies with each of these institutions: inclusive, digital, and green. And these 3 words put together are really what we saw on stage earlier. Inclusivity, youth, women trying to push economic growth. Digital, you cannot go on any project today, be it small or big, without having that digital element. And number 3, green. And as we saw, it's through technology and entrepreneurial, the biofuels, or trying to do the recycling. It is really the entrepreneurs that provide solutions, particularly at the local level, where the government sometimes cannot go with a mega project to do the recycling and so forth, is where this comes up. So in our policy formulation with the international community, these 3 words come in very much, and they are translated into programs and projects between us as Egypt, our bilateral partners, our multilateral partners as well, and then they are rolled out into programs that provide either financing, technical advisory, or also the collaboration with other ecosystems. AfriLabs is one of the institutions we work with very closely. We also hosted the African Women Innovation Conference in 2022. So there's a lot happening when it comes to knowledge exchange with the African continent. And it's not just the knowledge, it's also the culture of risk-taking, which today is becoming more respected and I would say more encouraged than maybe when I was in college, where you had to either be, a doctor, an engineer, or work in something boring like policy making. But anyways, it's today a realization that this is where the jobs are. This is where if you do take a risk, the return might be very big, and you need to try once and twice again.
Thank you very much. I see, I made a couple of notes earlier, and I see a great similarity in the notions. Inclusivity, gender equity, digital, market creation, and then green and sustainability. So the keywords that you mentioned there were already mirrored. So I think the general framework is the same. Forgive me, but now the ladies are actually going to, because we can't talk about gender equity and inclusion without actually hearing. And I've seen a lot of female faces on stage when we made the photo earlier. Mavis is nodding, so the workshop was a lot of power, which is of course also, Mrs. Pickle, in the idea and the ideal of the collaboration with the partner countries. That needs to be strengthened. So, Audrey, let me start with you. You actually started a business in agriculture, in soil regeneration, a buzzword in every climate and agriculture a discussion. Of the issues, of the topics that we've heard, what was it that you had to fight with in order to actually get established? And now that you're established, the next step, take us along with your story.
Okay, it's a pleasure to be here and be heard and also represent, you know, my like-minded, resilient entrepreneurs in the midst. Hi, everyone. I'm Audrey Estaku, and I would say I started Sabon Sake, which is a climate tech organization at the intersection of regenerative agriculture. Simply means you're working with nature to grow the food that you eat, and doing this in a healthy, sustainable, and resilient fashion. And then the other bit is with carbon financing, which is the recent part or our next step in ensuring that we can make sure that smallholder farmers are more inclusive and tapping into both the carbon markets as well as ESG projects, just so that we can shoulder the burden they have in transitioning into a more sustainable farming approach and tackling the climate crisis at the same time. My story really began, I'll say, aside the fact that I had a dad that was so passionate about agriculture, and right from the kitchen, my dad and I would take the tomato seeds, throw them in the yard, and then I was so excited about things germinating, you know, and playing with the soils, right? And it's gone a long way with me, such that anywhere I go, I like to plant something, and it's exciting to see it grow. And it was at that time it was easy to see it grow, but currently it's not that easy to grow. I would say that, and that's why that's for the nurture side of why I actually started Sabon Sake. But the curiosity side of it started off by reading the newspaper in the library, and what triggered me was the fact that Ghana, which is where I come from, had a major $1 million food factory set up and established, only for us to hear that it had collapsed. It was resuscitated and had collapsed again. It was mind-boggling. I was like, why? You know, and the reason was that, you know, there was inadequate raw supply of raw materials. But Africa, Ghana has arable land. It didn't connect. It didn't make sense to me. So from there, I just took trips, you know, right from college, entered the villages, the rural communities where food is actually grown, and tried to understand how we could work with the farmers, you know, work with the soils to actually feed the food factories to feed the world. So that's exactly the story, and why we're passionate about ensuring that now we can build the capacity for the smallholder farmers to actually keep growing food. They need the knowledge, the tools. So we've currently produced, have set up a biochar production facility that allows us to produce organic fertilizer, which is biochar based, right, to feed the soils and make this more accessible to them. The knowledge is with capacity building, ensuring that they can have the resources. We recently had a training for over 700 farmers on regenerative agriculture, and then also supply them, you know, free inputs, and created the opportunity for them to learn and then walk with them through the transition.
Thank you very much for taking us also along that road that you traveled. Maria Teresa, business in Tanzania, a little bit from help from German partners that saw the benefit in it. In the health area, and you just mentioned 700 subscriptions, farmers that you work with in Ghana. Thank you also for not just sort of concentrating on the urban area, because of course we need to address the countryside. You've got 10,000 subscriptions already. Again, it was not like, it didn't start with the 10,000. So if you could condense your story into 3-4 steps. Today, congratulations, but it wasn't easy.
No, it wasn't. So myself, like many young entrepreneurs, our innovations or our solutions mainly come from 2 areas. Our lived experiences, we have grown in challenging environment, and noticing the gap in the market. And for us, we started with research, and then we realized that 50% of people in sub-Saharan Africa will go through their lifetime from birth to death without visiting a healthcare facility or seeing a doctor.
50%.
50%, and this is data from WHO. We also went further in learning, I and my partner, who's a medical doctor, that the region that has the highest rate in disease burden also has the lowest number of global health workers. It's 2 doctors per 10,000 people. To put that in context with Europe, it's 39 doctors per 10,000 people. So we sat down together and asked ourselves, what can we do about this? And we started building mobile Afia to bring access to health to people who would never have access otherwise. And also we looked at climate challenges and know that these issues will become even worse with climate change, with extreme weather, with challenges in food security that will also increase challenges in the healthcare sector. So we started with research, of course, and then we went to a much more difficult area that some of you here work in, policies and guidelines, because our compliance stage included the Ministry of Health, of course, but also the telecommunication industry. And at that time, we didn't even have a telehealth guideline within the country. So these are sometimes some of the challenges that young people who are working in sustainable solutions faces. But after that, we worked for some time to account these challenges. But we also faced the financing challenge. And we have angel investors, and we're very thankful that also here we discussed angel investors as a core support for young entrepreneurs, because we were financed by angel investors, female angel investors to be particular, who were willing to take a risk in a very new area. And I think this is also very important. The establishment of the Entrepreneurship Bank, I think, should also come with establishment of financing for research, for allowing entrepreneurs to fail fast, to figure out the processes, to pilot, to test, which I think now in our financial models and frameworks, this is missing. But in a nutshell, this was our process, and we were able to also benefit from capacity building, which I know our former colleagues talked about, but programs, for example, by GIZ, like SPTA, that build the capacity but also connect young entrepreneurs with German businesses and allow them to actually collaborate and trade together. This was one of the biggest part of our success story as well.
Thank you very much for pointing out also the 4 conditions, or the several conditions for building a successful business, and one that is socially incredibly viable. Which brings me to you, Lassina. Smart Africa, you said, is for all Africa. Traditionally, and if you look at both your businesses, both your solutions, they do depend heavily on digital, but they also depend on connectivity. We know Africa has already come a long way, and there are a couple of applications that we as Europeans sort of look at, like, mobile banking, mobile insurance, often sort of Kenya and nowadays also Nigerian enforced, one can say. What still needs to happen in order to make that a bit more available in all of Africa?
Yeah, thank you very much for the questions. Let me just set something straight. When the perception, when you look at Africa, you think maybe the connectivity is the main challenge. The good news is the last report of GSMA, 85% of our population are covered by the mobile broadband, which basically means the coverage gap is between 15 and 20. What does it mean? It means people are not covered. On average, we have a 53% or close to 60 today, on average in the world, of population covered. It means we have about 43 not covered, not connected. The biggest challenge in Africa is not the coverage gap, it's a usage gap. Out of those 85% who are covered by the mobile, only 25% are using it. It means the population, the areas are covered, the population is covered, but only 25% are using. Why? That's what we call usage gap. Close to 60%, it has to do with affordability, one. It has to do with the 4 factors: affordability, smart devices cost, local context, the local content, what the startup are doing, and the 4th is the cyber hygiene. These are the main challenges. How the world average is close to 60% and Africa is still at 43, let me share something with you. If you combine the entire capacity of satellite around our planet, together you reconcile it with the fiber optic in the sea, submarine cable, with the fiber optic in the house, it covers 96% of the world's surface of the population living. So how come we're still behind? It all boils down to regulation. Regulation for development. The country that you see progressive, disruptive, they have agile regulation. Since the independence of most of our countries back in the 60s, how many times they went through a reform in terms of telecom regulations? Very low. And I was happy to see one of the startups was talking about TVET. In Germany here, for example, the importance of regulations, when the young kids get to the 9th grade or the 12th grade, they may decide to skip to go to a professional school and come back to academia. When you drop out of the 9th grade in Africa, it's a sign of failure. That is the difference. It has to do with the regulation. So what we need to do, we need to regulate in a way it is agile for the entire continent to be able to fill up those 60% gap. Because 60%, it means we do have a connectivity, we do have a network, people are not using it. And also, I'm not going to tell my grandmother in the village, for example, you use the internet just for, tweeting or meta. We have to give them a local context. And that lies on the shoulder of our entrepreneurs here.
Absolutely. And yes, please.
I would just like to add on the local context, because this is on the ground one of the challenges that we faced, that in access to healthcare using digital tools, in mobile health, in mHealth, you have the language barrier, and also the knowledge barrier, the literacy, the digital literacy, that if you only have content or medical personnel who are speaking in one language, you might leave out majority of the population due to the language barrier. And also literacy, that people do not know how to properly use their phone, so you have to teach them first.
I love these questions. You know why? China, the whole population of China did not have to learn English to be where they are.
Yeah.
It goes back to artificial intelligence. Today, artificial intelligence, Africa will be the most beneficial continent for that use cases. Why? Allowing a cell phone, you speak in your local languages, and the cell phone will do whatever whoever educated person is using it for. So because as we're moving to our AI, blockchain, metaverse, we are actually widening the gap. How do we shrink that gap? Is for our young entrepreneur here, present here, to get on the national processes language, to develop application where you can talk in your local language for our grandmothers to do whatever they want to do. Send 100 M-Pesa, for example, 100 shilling to be using M-Pesa. Technology is not the limit. Regulations and the willingness, that's the problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I'm looking at you, Birgit, but if you're happy, then...
Yeah,
then
no, just very, I mean, just to sort of, I don't want to spoil the discussion, but just to sort of on regulation, probably there's a lot we can learn from Africa as well. Let you know, maybe you can give us some hints here, but on the spoiling, I think there is regulation for development, not for regulation, fully agreed. But we are, for example, working with the African Union Commission and also with Smart Africa and others on sort of data policy frameworks, you know, for the continent, and then each country needs to actually implement at the national level, because in the end regulation, if you don't have an integrated market like the EU, where certain areas are integrated, including regulation, not all of them, but otherwise it's countries that need to sit down and put the regulation in place. Do we also have to talk about the risks? On KI, for example. I just throw this out for the discussion because I see the opportunities, but I think we need to discuss both sides. That's one question. And then also, thank you also to Audrey and Maria Teresa for sharing your experience. I would actually, you know, if we have the time, like to understand better also, what are your questions or demands to your respective governments to move your businesses forward? Because as a bilateral partner, and also, you know, the African Development Bank as a multilateral partner, this is one thing we can do. We can take up issues and discuss them on policies and regulation, for example, with respective governments. Once we've identified the gaps where we can come in. Egypt, the same thing.
I have two people who are holding their breath. So maybe Rania and then Akinwumi without any further question.
No, just on the regulations. We live in a very competitive world, and governments realize that if they are not keeping up with what's happening, they're losing. So with the African Development Bank, we've done many studies on regulations for VCs and for you know, how to push the ecosystem. There's another one underway with IFC. So the regulation aspect, because we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are places that have done it and have done it well. So we just take these practices and then when we take a look at the gaps, because the gaps are very local, this is where the importance of these studies come in. So number one, addressing regulations is taking place, but it's taking place as a continuous process because the world is changing very fast. A few years ago, we didn't have AI. When it comes to fintech, for example, in 2017, the central bank was not very open to fintech, or it wasn't part of the, you know, their discussions in the board. Today, already that is taking place. It's taking place very, very widely. The payment system is up to date with what is required. So what I'm trying to say is that reform is a continuous process. It doesn't end, and it's the voices of what we saw earlier because of the practice that can actually shape this. There was a question from Ashton on stage for me on Monday, why to include youth in the discussions when it comes to policy formulations. I will give two examples. In our case in Egypt, we have the UN has put together its Generation Unlimited. This is a very big initiative from the UN to actually push younger generation to be part of the TVET discussion, to be part of the training discussion, the skilling and so forth. So we have our Egyptian example of that or prototype, which is called Shabab Balad. And there we have lots of discussions with youth to be able to push policy. Also, when it comes to innovative solutions for climate, and thank you for what you're doing when it comes to agriculture and also for health, the concept of digital technology, joint digital technology, also platforms that we have with the UN in the country to be able to get these different solutions on agriculture, on health, on transportation, and push it forward. I would just conclude that when we were listening to the keynote and looking at the companies on the screen, you could see each and every company had the SDGs. Mm-hmm. And this is also something that is extremely important. We always say that the SDG gap is very big and it cannot be closed unless private sector is engaged, unless entrepreneurship is pushed forward. So this is what all companies are doing today, to be able to access the finance from the African Development Bank, from IFC, from EBRD that actually come in with equity into startups. In Egypt, 42% is from development partners. You need to be able to say how you are addressing the global goals. So this is another item, and it could be encouraged from the government. There's a lot of technical advisory that is provided to be able to identify this and count it, because the word accountability was mentioned as well, so that when you are provided with this money, what are you accounting for? So it's it's all hands on deck, if you will. Government has a role, private sector, those who have done it before, providing the mentorship and the exchange of views. But just on the regulation, it's a continuous process. Things change very fast. What is good today will not necessarily be good tomorrow, but it requires adaptability from the government side. COVID was the biggest example of everybody needing to shift very quickly to be able to move forward. So we need to have the spirit of COVID, not the actual COVID, but the spirit of changing very fast to be able to adapt, because it's not just a virus or a pandemic, but it's also being able to create the jobs and be inclusive.
And Akinwumi, I know that you've already wanted to say something. In addition to what you wanted to say, you are sitting on many other panels as well, also with the private banking sector. If you could reflect also on the attitudes and the thinking that you hear there, do you actually notice change, or is it rather, yes, fine, we want entrepreneurs, but let somebody else take the risk?
Well, let me start from that. I think whenever you see a banker, all they're looking at is what's your business plan and what's the risk. Yeah. And when they see young people, what they see really is risk most of the time. And so the instruments for commercial banking sector, they're not really designed for businesses of young people. And that's why I really agree with Yvette that we need to completely change that whole system, And that's why, when I look at it, I thought to myself that everywhere I go in Africa, they tell me young people are being empowered, right? And then I look around, I don't see any young people telling me that they are being empowered. So I ask myself, what really are all these youth empowerment programs about, apart from just empowering the people who say they're empowering them? No, I don't believe that Africa's young people need quote-unquote empowerment. They need investment. We need to totally revamp the financial ecosystem to serve their needs. That's why we're doing this youth entrepreneurship investment banks that you've all given me assignments for. What's his name? Marvin? What's his name? Maurice, yeah. So I know that by December 31st, when you're coming in, you've got to be able to walk into it. We got one approved, $16 million for Liberia. We're going to do 10 of them next year. And they're very, very, very important, because I really think that young people must be able to walk into a bank that understands their needs, that have the instruments that are appropriate for their needs, that sees them for who they are. They may not have the assets or the collaterals that you're talking about, but the ideas that they have, the innovation, the creativity are the things that we have to continue to finance. Now, I want to come back to the issue of infrastructure that you were talking about. Yeah. I think it's one thing else to do infrastructure, and we do a lot of infrastructure as a bank. I mean, in the last 10 years, we've probably done $44 billion of investment in infrastructure, including digital infrastructure. So whether it's submarine cables in Central Africa, or the ones that we're doing together, which is in Trans-Sahara backbone and all of those things, they're important. However, those things are useless unless you have the skills. People that understand the soft skills are very important. And that's why for us at the African Development Bank, we started a big program called Coding for Employment, which is coding is the new currency in the world today. And so we're working now to help to create 130 computer coding centers around Africa, together with Microsoft, with Google, also with MasterCard Foundation and all of that in many of the countries in Nigeria and Kenya, Rwanda, and so on. But beyond that is we did something in Rwanda which is incredible, which is we financed the Kigali Institute of Technology. which you know quite a lot about, and which has ICT. And that ICT, we did it with Carnegie Mellon University, which is world class. So 98% of the students that finish from there, they get picked up all around the world. But I wanted to give an example of why skills, knowledge skills, very important for entrepreneurship. One day, I was with President Kagame, and he told me about, he was jogging in Kigali, and about 8:30 in the evening. And that I was a young lady. We got Audrey and Marie-Therese, and I'll come back to that issue of the women in a minute. And she was jogging the opposite direction as the president. So of course the security people pushed her away. And she said, oh, no, hold on a second, Mr. President. You sent me to the Kigali Institute of Technology, and I want to tell you what I want to do. And so he said, okay, bring her close up. So she did. He said, okay. And so they gave her an appointment to come and see him at the State House. So he told me he gave her some money, just a small amount of money, and she disappeared. What's the name? Jide is here, so Clarice Irigabisa, yeah. And she disappeared for more than 2.5 years. They didn't see the president. The president told me that after that, she came up and she said, Mr. President, the business that you helped me start with a little bit of some grant 2.5 years ago, I built it. It's a tech business, and I just sold it for $21 million at the age of 24. Wow. Now, I told President Kagame, please tell every African heads of state to jog at 8:30 at night and meet young people to do that. And I'm saying that because I think the ecosystem that develops the skills, the competencies, the capacities are very, very important if we are going to really unlock our potential in this digital world. The last thing I want to say is about looking at what Marie-Therese Audrey was saying, and thank you for wanting to always throw something out there and it grows. Of course, as a former Minister of Agriculture in Nigeria, I'm bubbling when I hear that because I think agriculture is the coolest business. Nobody drinks oil, nobody smokes gas, everybody eats food. So the future billionaires of Africa will not come from oil and gas sector. They're going to come from the agriculture sector. The size of that sector is going to be $1 billion by 2030. So if you want to really be rich, please get into agriculture. Get Audrey. Now, but talking to the women, you see, in Africa, women run Africa. Actually, if you don't know that. The businesses that you see in Africa, most of them are run by women. You go to the open market, it's run by women. Today, we're getting a lot more women in the boardrooms. We have women leaders here that are now running great businesses. We have to make sure that they have access to finance. It's not easy for women to have access to finance, especially small and medium-sized enterprises of women. And that is why, for us at the African Development Bank, I led the bank to start what's called the Affirmative Finance Action for Women in Africa to mobilize $5 billion for businesses of women in Africa. Sorry, man, I don't have anything against you, but look, the fact is that, and the reason why this was important for me, just a second, was, you are talking about us as policymakers, but it's not as if you don't need an econometric model to determine what you want. Sometimes a leader has to lead from the heart, not from your head. I traveled. What inspired me was actually in the 90s, before I became president of the bank. I took a plane. It used to call them at that time Air Afrique. You remember that plane, Air Afrique? Yeah. I took it to Nigeria, and I was coming back to Cote d'Ivoire. And how are all these women in the plane? And they were all market women, carrying baskets on their head, carrying all kind of, pine, No, just piece of clothing that they wrap around themselves because the tax people wanted, custom people were not fair to them. They taped them all around themselves and they entered the plane. Now, I had a computer. It was a small compact. You remember those little compact we used to have in those days? I tried to put it up, there was no space. And I was told, how many times do you take this plane? And I said, once, maybe every 3-4 months. He said, these women take this flight twice a day. This plane belongs to them. Give us your computer. We'll put it in for you. Make more room for the women. And so what I want to say is that we must make more room for the women. That's why when I became president of the African Development Bank, I told myself we have to do everything to de-risk lending for women. So today, with the affirmative finance action at FAWA, we have 96 financial institutions that are now lending to women in 35 African countries. And we have to continue to make sure that it also gets down to the small, the very, very small businesses at the back. At the end of the day, I'm going to close. But I'm very passionate about this particular issue because I believe that when I see businesses of women like this, it reminds me that when women win in Africa, Africa will win. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We could listen to you all day, but we don't have all day. Thank you very much for sharing both your heart's outlook and the putting into practice your idea. So, well, first of all, it might be quite nice that the lady who got, was it more than 21 million, should have gotten a little bit money back to other entrepreneurs that could sort of, shift the process as well. But let's now talk to our two ladies. Having heard all that, having heard all the would you have been able to have gone to the African Development Bank and said, come on, I've got this great idea? Or in the end, I believe that the initial seed investment was done by, you happened to be stuck due to Corona in Germany, and you met these two German entrepreneurs that said, worthwhile cause.
Yes, I mean, I would prefer to actually go to the development bank and
say... now you've got the contact, but...
Yes, I mean, I know this, and I know that there have been financing for entrepreneurs. I think most of it was concentrated in SMEs. I know in Tanzania, there have been a couple of initiatives by AFDB. But I think the establishment of the Entrepreneurship Bank is really, really critical because many startups do not fall under small businesses. When we started, we did not fall because our initial capital, what we needed was 150,000 euros. Now so that we can build the infrastructure, we can do the marketing, we can start our business. And with the financing mechanism, we don't fall under small businesses. We cannot get financing as a small business because that financing is just not available. But my recommendation, hearing this, and I'm very happy that Dr. Adesina, you said you're going to take us as entrepreneurs on this panel and form an advisory board, because I think it's really, really important to hear our voices, not as part of projects, not as part of reports, which I think often happens, that we have been spoken for in most of these panels, in most of discussions, at our local levels, at our national levels, but also regional levels. I think it's important to hear our voices. I think it's also important to take the recommendations. I think these recommendations that were already presented are crucial, and for us, they all do apply. But to stress on one recommendation that I also personally worked on yesterday, considering entrepreneurs as implementing partners. I know Ashton said it, but also I think it's important to evaluate within your own organizations as development partners for GIZ, how many projects that you have within African countries where you specifically work with young people as implementation partners. Within our ministries, with our political leaders, how many of the public tenders that you give, that you work with other partners that actually go to young entrepreneurs? Because I think this will also bridge the gap in financing when we see that the public sector, the development sector, especially in just transition, actually works with young people, give the businesses when they are to young people. As a woman here, I understand that women representation did not just come. We had to demand for it. When women voices are lacking in policy making, in decision making, we see it as incomplete. I think also when young entrepreneurs are lacking in financing mechanism, when AFDB give loans to also local financiers, we sometimes have mechanism where a portion has to go to women. Maybe we need the same mechanism for young entrepreneurs, for young people, so that they are actually implementers on the ground. Same for politicians, same for financiers, and even more importantly, same for development partners, to actually incorporate these solutions. Young people who are working here for green solutions, who are working for health, are really hoping to also work on the ground, to be given a chance for their solutions to be implemented, to be actual partners, not just projects or not just programs. So I think that is crucial.
Thank you very much. I'm looking at you, Audrey. Again, the sector that you're working in is, and doing a number of other conferences on, development and agriculture, is still not really sexy. With IT, it could be considered sexy. I mean, we're talking about difference in attitude, in looking at the sector. Not that it is essential. I think that's a given. But it's just like, young people would much rather sit in front of a computer than get their hands dirty. Now, how would you think, do you need more help, assistance in capacity building of people around you? How many jobs are you capable of creating around you? I mean, you having already made it to a certain point, what is the next step? What do you need?
Okay, first of all, agriculture is sexy, and
I think so as well.
Yeah.
But attitude.
Yes. Just hoping to be preaching to those who are not converted yet. Agriculture is sexy, and it is a lucrative business as well. And I think that is why I actually entered into it. Although there are challenges within the sector, you talked about jobs, right? I'd say that in Africa is the largest contributor, one of the largest contributors to GDP, right? Employs a lot of people. In rural households, derive 2/3 of their income from agriculture, right? And for us, we just setting up a production facility that produces fertilizer, right? Means on a daily, based on the projects we have, an average of 20 people, right? To hire, to pay them to actually run the facility. And that creates more opportunities for people, for youth, for women. We hire resource mobilizers to harness the power of waste from processing mills, from their farmlands. And I would say that one of the things we need in order to scale and go to the next step, I'd say yes, ecosystem support. And under that falls capacity building. I think we need to strengthen the understanding of our markets, both locally and globally, because African businesses need to transcend our borders in order for us to actually create the catalytic change we want to make. I'd say the other, obviously, is finance. We need a lot of incentives. It's not easy. You could easily give up. When you wake up every day and have to be in firefighting mode all the time in order to get your equipment running, utilities, paying laborers, and all that. But as well, I'd say the last bit is piloting and partnership. And I would say that has been the channel in which we've been growing and have actually grown. We're yet to raise external financing because we're trying to be deliberate and intentional about understanding the industry before walking into the space. But we leveraged on giants, established companies already in the sector, walked up to them, spoke about our objectives, how aligned we are strategically, and then we started piloting with them. And I feel that if we could have more of our businesses have agreements with already established institutions, right? Pilot, and literally it should be paid, I hope. I would love that. But then have paid pilots or unpaid pilots with these established institutions. That helps de-risk financing, first of all, and two, as well, helps with the knowledge around building a resilient business. So this for me is what I would say.
Can I just quickly?
Sorry, can I just, because I just want to reconfirm that agriculture is very, very sexy. and just to address, the issue that Audrey was saying, we have a program that's called Enable Youth at the Bank, which is getting young people like her into agriculture. We've invested more than $490 million in that in more than 35 countries, doing exactly just many like Audrey that you are seeing here. Now, I want to say to her point about connecting to market. You see, one of the challenges for agriculture is that we've not been investing structurally in making sure that the infrastructure density in our rural areas and agricultural zones are such that you can lower the transaction costs for farms like yourself, lower the risk, increase competitiveness and efficiencies of our value chains. And that's why at the African Development Bank, we're investing heavily now in what we call special agro-industrial processing zones. They are brand new zones that we're doing now. We have 25 of those now in more than 15 countries, where we are investing in power, water, roads, irrigation, logistics, so that storage things, so that you can actually not lose a lot of what you produce. Then you can then transpose the food and ag businesses into infrastructure-enabled zones that will allow things to really work. And last week, 2 weeks ago, at the Africa Investment Forum, some of you were there, we launched a $3 billion alliance for special agro-industrial processing zones in Africa. And that will help to make sure that agriculture gets more competitive. Finally, it's about lending to agriculture. I want to say here that when you don't know what you're doing, then you don't, I mean, it's like swimming, right? Somebody tells you the other side of the pool is very deep. That's the best part of the pool, right? If you know how to swim, right? When I was Minister of Agriculture in Nigeria, I worked with the German government about how we can get private equity funds set up. We set up Africa's first private equity fund that will finance, that is called FAFIN, Fund for Agricultural Finance in Nigeria, when I was minister, with 30 million euros from you and $30 million from us. We need to make sure they have private equity funds, Cola and other, that can invest in agribusinesses, and we can provide first and second loss to actually de-risk that for us. And finally, about commercial bank lending. African commercial banks don't lend to agriculture because they say it's risky. But is it really risky? Now, when I was minister in Nigeria, we set up a fund. It's called Nigerian Incentive Risk-Based. It's a risk facility to share risk with all the commercial banks in Nigeria. I got all the chief risk officers into a room and asked them, if you are lending to agriculture, what would be your loss rate? They said 90%, you know. And I said, you're lending to your friends. You know, you just don't know what you're doing. And so we decided to set up this facility that essentially does a first loss if you are lending to companies in agriculture. And then if you fix the financial value chain, you fix the supply chains, you de-risk the entire system. We ran it for 4 years. Jide, one of the commercial bankers, is right here. You can get up so that they don't know. You know, he was one of those commercial bankers that was that they didn't want to lend to agriculture, right?
Congratulations, sir.
We ran it for 4 years. Now, here's this. The loss rate was less than 1%.
Good.
Okay?
Perfect.
Today, African Development Bank is doing that in several African countries. Agriculture is not as risky as you think. People just say one episode, then they think everything is risky. So the point I want to say is that we have the instrument to de-risk agricultural value chains. We're structurally making agriculture much more efficient and competitive with these infrastructure investments. And I think that we need to just make sure that we support our farmers as well, because I can understand what you're saying. In Europe, you have massive subsidies for farmers. You know, billions of dollars. But African farmers are not supported. And I want to stay on this stage today that Africa must not abandon its farmers. It must support its farmers, small and medium-sized enterprises, because we are not going just to be the market for others. We want to be also companies like ours that are competitive in the global world for food and agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Okay, let's establish agriculture is sexy, but now let's move on to other areas, other industries as well. And I'd like to sort of get a support system. I know that you want to say something. You already picked up the phone, the microphone.
Don't do the
Could I
European
please also
subsidies.
ask you, in addition to anything that you want to say, how do you enable entrepreneurship thinking? Because that's basically what we're talking about.
Okay, so I want to go to one of the recommendations that our entrepreneurs on stage mentioned, and also link it to Dr. Adesina's point. Sharing information on the tools that exist.
Yes.
Whether government tools, regional bank tools, international institutions tools, development partners, bilateral tools, because there is a huge gap. Lots of tools are there, but the entrepreneurs don't know how to access it, don't know that they exist in the first place. So what we created in our case, and we're going to launch it mid-December, is a portal that has all the tools available with our development partners, bilateral, multilateral, in one place so that our entrepreneurs can go in, private sector in general. So private sector, because all these, all regional banks and international institutions have facilities for the big companies, private sector, for the SMEs, and for the startups. So this is going to be in one place for accessibility. So information sharing, information availability is one point that was made, and this is being addressed. Another point that was mentioned is, can we rely on entrepreneurs or SMEs when it comes to government procurement? Because the government is the biggest purchaser of many of the what's provided by startups and SMEs, and I want to link this to agriculture and food, to food and water, because food and water are linked, and we have put together a platform of an access of water, food, and energy. African Development Bank is with us in both food and water, and we have with the UN the joint team on digitization and innovation, and startups are going to be part of providing technology within that nexus. So this is another way of doing exactly what was mentioned in the morning, where the startups can come in. I want to conclude by 2 points. First, we've seen so many successful examples, so we need to celebrate that. And we need to try and push that forward, because it means that something is going right. It's not that it's all bad. So that's one point. The second point is also startups in services. I used to be Minister of Tourism. Tourism is another very important sector within Africa because of the diversity and so forth. And so startups and solutions to make the experience of the tourist easier or diversified is another very important sector that we need to look into. And your question was?
My question was about entrepreneurship skills.
Skills.
I.e. the skills that you need in order to become not just self-confident, but also know which buttons to press, who to get onto your agenda, i.e. this is my business, this is what I want to do, but you please give me finance and that. But that is not taught at school.
Yeah, so there's 2 points. So that goes back to the access of information, that if you want to do a startup, but how do I get the money? So you find in one place, maybe I can, pitch in a certain way. The African Development Bank has this facility. The World Bank is doing an incubation for ideas in agriculture, or support IFCs pushing women through a Wi-Fi initiative that they have. So I think the information of what tools and facilities are available might encourage, and will definitely encourage, those who have are flirting with certain ideas to say, oh, it's not going to be impossible. That's number one. Number two, showcasing successful examples and keep on providing more of that. And as I mentioned in my very earlier remarks, creating that culture of being able to dream and fail and maybe succeed and see others who have, and this is growing in my country, but also across the continent. It's no longer, I don't want to say taboo, but it's actually encouraged to take that risk. And we have now prizes for entrepreneurs, and they are a center stage when it comes to being engaged with policymakers or rewarded for the risk that they've taken. So this is I would say, an answer. The information, each and every institution provides a lot of training, a lot of skills, the whole idea of incubators for startups does exist and exists for women sometimes, by sector sometimes, mentorship from earlier entrepreneurs to younger ones. So this is something that is ongoing as well.
Thank you very much. I'd like to sort of play the ball over to you, Lasina. Smart Africa doesn't just have to do with ICT. It doesn't have to do with Wi-Fi. Smart and entrepreneurial skills. Where's the connection and how do we spread it more?
Yeah,
and you have half an hour. No, don't worry, don't worry.
Yeah, our theme is really is to connect, innovate, transform, accelerate. Connect has to do with the connectivity. Innovate has to do with innovative financing, innovation as we know it, innovative technology. For that, Smart Africa, we created SANIA, Smart Africa Network of Incubators and Accelerator. We don't only talk our talk, but we run our talk, not walking. We run our talk. For that, we created Smart Africa Block Funds based in Luxembourg, where we had about, we call each country member to contribute about 5 million euro, taking the first loss because it's a blended financing. We had a Côte d'Ivoire who joined in, and we have Luxembourg government, so we have about 10 million. We've been able to fund about 5 to 6 startup companies from Africa. They do a presentation every time they get. It's completely a vehicle of its own that's actually created by Smart Africa, Block Smart Africa Fund. But not only that, in order, digital transformation is first of all transformation of mindset. And in order to be transformed, you have to be informed. So we created like 18 months ago, Smart Africa Digital Academy. In fact, we started here with the GIZ BMZ. Today, the Smart Africa Digital Academy has 5 layers: decision makers, advanced tech, tech entrepreneurs, STEM, and general public. Today on the decision makers, because sometimes we think that regulation is that easy, we think that the decision makers in front of us, they're actually aware of what's going on. No, we train decision makers. We talk about ministers, chief of staff, chief of cabinet, so on and so forth. We've trained close to 5,000 today in the last 12 months from 32 different countries. And we are now scaling up. We got a fund from BMZ, of course, and now we're scaling up with the World Bank program. That is SANIA, that is the SADA, and at the same time, with the tech entrepreneurship layer, which is coding school, as Dr. Adesina was saying, was very true. When we said in 2040, in 2050, 40% of the world workforce is going to come from Africa, it is not Africa of today. It is Africa which is tech savvy. So education is very important. And here, your innovations in Europe or in the West in general comes out of the university. For us, innovation comes from the street. How do we organize these young generation, these young people? You can ask each one of them, entrepreneur, where do they come from? They come from very diverse background. But the talent has no source. You can have someone work in the supermarket, test him, he will have a talent. So this is what we need to organize through Smart Africa SANIA. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm looking quickly at Birgit. I know that you're gearing up for the last words. So I'll skip you for this round. I'm not going to replicate your question, but the one thing, and not next Monday, in the next year, that you're going to concentrate about in order to facilitate more entrepreneurship, more gender unbiased approaches. They are. And this time you don't have 10 minutes. Akinwumi, please.
No, I'll just focus on 2 issues as we think about COP28. We want to build from the Youth Adapt program that we currently have, that is financing a whole range of green transitions and all of that. And we've partnered to be able to announce that we will be able to put together a fund of $1 billion that would support entrepreneurs that are working in this whole area of climate change, energy transitions, and so on. So that's one thing that we're working on, and we're going to be ready for that by COP28. The second thing that I want to say is about the issue of skills, and I think we were just airing that from the last interventions. I think there's a big disconnect between the skills that I mean, training that people get in universities and what they actually need in the marketplace. And there is no feedback loop from that marketplace back to universities. And that's why we are working on at the African Development Bank. It's something called skills enhancement zones. You know, you can imagine if you take the panel earlier, they were saying that the issue of placement, I think somebody talked about the issue of placement. So if you take young people and you take them out of university, you pass them right through these skills enhancement zones, and you can think of them as verticals. So this is pharmaceutical, this is IT, this is food and ag business, this is whatever it is, right? And you spend 12 months, right? Their skills are improved vertically, and their skills are improved horizontally. And three things can happen. They can decide that they want to set up their own business, have Kola and others invest in them as private equity and all that. And you have that. But then you can connect them back to the firms within those zones, because it means, excuse me, they have access to markets, and so they can thrive in that particular place. Same zone can then get their skills feeding back to the universities to make sure that the whole of the disconnect is actually dealt with in a very, very clear manner. And I think that's why for us in Nigeria, for example, Kola, we put in Ondo. Which state are you from? Ochin State, okay. In Ondo State, we just supported the Ekiti State Knowledge Zone, which would do exactly that. And I think we want to set up these kind of zones all across. So we are connecting university ecosystem back into the to the industry and make sure that the industry is fitting back into the curriculum. So a lot for me to think about and keep me awake.
Thank you very much. I would like to hear from all of you. On the way there, there's an organization, a tiny one, but I think it reflects a lot what you said, education for employment or education for entrepreneurship, and that's probably one of the aspects that we need. Can we have the next steps of our two entrepreneurs here? Audrey, your next steps, like in a minute, take us along. Your dream is sort of the first hook, and then think bigger.
Okay.
If you get the money and, you know, just sort of ask your neighbor, he will give you any check. No.
Go for a walk.
Thank you. Thank you. Take the offer. All right. We're keen on transforming the agriculture/climate space. We are currently under the carbon removal market. We all know we are transitioning, and there's an opportunity here to tap into that market, right? But as well, make sure that we can trickle resources, investments down to the grassroots, and that's where we come in and we're passionate about. So we want to be able to train, provide inputs, knowledge, and tools to the next generation of farmers that will be climate resilient and empowered to actually grow more food to feed the world. And then our next step as well is really to trickle down finance to them. It's currently 1.7% of access to climate finance for smallholder farmers. That should never be the case for people that feed us. So that's our next step.
Thank you so much, and lots of energy for it. Well, I'm not worried about you. Next step for you, Marie-Theresa.
Our next step is to continue our mission, which is to connect people with the health they need in languages they understand and technologies they can access. And our hope in this room that there are partners who are also looking to advance healthcare using digital tools. I know the AFDB, if they were not interested, I hope they are interested now, but also a call to action to support entrepreneurs that are working in such innovation challenges, but also to support us in our mission.
It sounds also like both of your missions and businesses could be replicated in other countries. Similar issues, probably slightly different solutions, but the general context is there. Well, this was me sort of as a moderator leaving my job. 1 minute, next step for Smart Africa, for everybody here.
To integrate Africa into a single digital market, we need an interoperable digital ID, EKYC. In Africa, we live in the truth economy. We don't live in a trust economy. Truth economy, whatever we spend on our Visa card, MasterCard, is the money we have at the bank. Why? Commercial bank don't trust us. You guys live in a trust economy because you can use OPM, other people's money. All of these why? Because, yes, because you've been able to identify by the government, they know who you are, they know where you live. Next step is to have a digital ID and interoperable across all the regions in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your big vision. Keep up the energy. Rania.
What I would want to do in the next period is to test when the information is available on the accessibility and affordability, how better we can do. So that's number one. And remember that governments don't have targets for startups. That's another, you have targets for poverty, you have targets for hunger, you have targets for gender inclusion. We don't have a target at all for startups. We don't measure, but I want to see maybe how we can put a metric of when accessibility is there, how they can do better. I just want to say that on COP27, since we're coming to COP28, we had a competition called Climate Tech Run. And it was open up for all countries. We had 98 countries, and this was an innovation and startup competition. We had 422 apply. We hosted them in Sharm el-Sheikh with the winners. We did another one, Climate Tech Run 2. The winners are going to be announced at COP28. But what was very important in this round, we took those who didn't make it. They applied last year, couldn't make it. They were still in the ideation sort of stage, and we encouraged them, and we're going to take them also to COP28. So the continuous push in changing that culture and encouraging is very important. And then finally, on education and entrepreneurship, today you find many schools giving courses on entrepreneurship. And it's not just, take a risk or not, but what does it mean from a business point of view? Because there are lots of returns if it's done well. So I think we're seeing it, more diversified, more engaged in universities. I know that Hadait had mentioned sustainability at a younger age to be taught. I think that by showing more examples of successful entrepreneurs in the continent and so forth, youth, younger generations, kids and so forth would say that these would become our role models going forward. And that's the way to answer your question on the appetite for taking risk.
Thank you very, very much for all your insights, your inputs, and your enthusiasm. And ladies and gentlemen, why don't you give our panel a big applause? Thank you so much, Marie-Thérèse, Lassina. It was a great pleasure. Thank you very much, Rania. It was fantastic. And here I already see the beginning of a great friendship.
Thank you.
Starting up.
Agriculture is cool.
Okay. With that word, thank you very much. I remain with Birgit Pickel up here because I'd actually like you to come a bit more center stage. And there was a reason behind Birgit not getting involved every round. It was actually by design. I just want to say I didn't ignore her. So maybe, Birgit, we can sit down. A lot of energy, a lot of buzz, certainly what I felt. Not just Mavis and the 4 entrepreneurs, but here. It almost seemed like a coalition of the willing and the capable. So what excited you? What was it that you heard that was maybe slightly different from other conferences?
Thank you very much, Connie, and sorry for keeping all of you now from lunch and networking. I know you're all waiting, but just give me a couple of minutes to share my impressions of this conference, which indeed is a bit different from other conferences we do here at the ministry. Just let me take one step back. About a year ago, we were sitting in exactly the same room, beginning of this year, and we launched our new sort of Africa strategy, which has the same title, Shaping the Future with Africa. What we're doing here today is actually looking at what did we write in the strategy and how do we implement it. So this is part and parcel of implementation. I think that's really great. In this strategy, we clearly said we want to explore new ways of cooperation. Now, having all the young entrepreneurs, but also policymakers here together is really exactly the way we want to work as a ministry so that our policies that we design here actually meet the needs of different stakeholders. So thank you very much for all the inspiring ideas and also challenging us a bit as policymakers. I would say I was probably quite a serious student, so when I was given homework, I took it seriously. I was given homework today, thank you very much, on financial inclusion, so we'll definitely look at that as well. I think the question, sort of, what is inspiring? It's of course the energy in this room. It's the different business ideas that were presented by our panelists here, but also by our high-level guests. All the ideas you were able to share, Mavis, Dr. Adesina, Lachina Kone, were really, I think, in terms of networking and sharing, is inspiring again for the young entrepreneurs and all the other people in the audience today. So I think that worked out really, really well as a concept. I think we need to have a frank dialogue on how to move forward. It was mentioned by Dr. Rania. Maybe do we have gaps in terms of instruments? Do we have gaps in terms of ideas? I don't know. Ideas are definitely around enough. I mean, we heard that today. There are ideas, there's innovation. So instruments, I think there is a lot around there. So let us really seriously look at addressing gaps in terms of, for example, gaps between funding, finance, education, technical assistance for entrepreneurs versus SMEs. That is something I took out of this. It's also part of the recommendations. But otherwise, in international development cooperation, there is a tendency there's a gap, we create a new instrument, we create a new fund. So I'm not always convinced that is the solution, because we also often hear that in the end, the clients, entrepreneurs like you sitting here, they don't even know all the offers that are there. So can we strengthen the tools that are there and see where are the gaps and how do we develop them forward? So I was really pleased that several partners here, our keynote speaker mentioned Africa Grow, which I think is a great tool. I think we have various people in the room as well that know this instrument very well. I think it's delivered several $100 million to various entrepreneurs in Africa via often venture capital funds, intermediaries. How can we develop this instrument forward and make it grow, Africa Grow, grow Africa Grow. So this is sort of a basic approach I would like to outline here, how to take also what we heard here forward for the future.
Can I just sort of ask you, we had here these 4 areas of policy recommendations.
Yes.
And I put down for Hidayat, who said, if you give finance, earmark it a little bit. Finance only if you give employment. Ashton was putting forward, or representing the ideas of the group, of course. Get away just from good regulations, make it relevant, bring it to implementation. Now that's something where you can only help indirectly, I suppose, as a partner.
Yeah, as a partner, and again, sort of looking at the instruments that are there. I think that is really a key issue. Also, I mean, I started talking about the spirit in which we want to work with our Africa strategy. We work in partnership. We work in cooperation. So, as partners, we want to, together with governments, I mean, looking at the 4 recommendations. You looked at, legal, regulatory, you looked at skills, you looked at networking, and you looked at finance. On the legal regulatory side, that is very important, that your respective governments or regional organizations or we as international institutions really look at what are the right, what is the right legal framework for your work. There, maybe we have a chance as a partner, which is the German government, represented by BMZ in my case, to engage in a dialogue with, we have Ghana here, we have Tanzania here, we have Egypt here, we have various countries. How can we support, to improve this regulatory environment? This is what we can do in the spirit of partnership, and we're happy to do so. Let me also, on the recommendations, I think. Thank you very much to all of you yesterday who worked out these recommendations. We do take them seriously, otherwise we wouldn't have done this conference. I already spoke about the homework. On financial inclusion, as Mavis said, it's been around for many, many years. So can we take it forward, please? It's so important, and particularly looking at the inclusion of women. We all know that I spoke to a lady in one African country and said, I go to the bank, I place my documents, and they are on the shelf for a year. A man walks into the bank, and it's taken, it's catered for immediately. So that needs to change. Financial inclusion of women is really important. And we will look at that seriously and revisit also the instruments we have. On skills, I think the German government is maybe a bit famous for working on TVET. But even though we have quite a good system here, the dual system, where companies and schools work together, we know it cannot be transferred one-to-one, but I think some basic ideas are still maybe useful. Even here in Germany, we discuss how attractive is TVET, because many young people want to go to university. So we talked about agriculture. Is agriculture sexy? Dr. Adesina? Yes, Can we also talk about vocational training and TVET as a key entry point for many young people on the African continent into employment and in the end earning an income for the family? Can we talk about TVET being sexy? So that's maybe something where we as Germany can contribute to as well. It's really the largest portfolio we have. And we are the largest bilateral funder in this area, so we're happy to come in here as well. I could say a lot more, but I want to stop because I already said I don't want to keep you from lunch. Let me just close by thanking all of you for the really inspiring recommendations, which we will take from here. I would be very interested to see where you, 36, I heard, entrepreneurs, will be in 10 years. So maybe we meet again in Berlin, at least, maybe even earlier, and listen to your stories and see where your businesses have developed. Thank you very much, also on behalf of the minister who was here for the opening, who couldn't be here all throughout, but she sends her regards. Thank you very much.
Last words, just a little bit of housekeeping. It was a great pleasure working with all of you, and I think the spirit in this room showed it. So I hope that you can come true on your promise, except that then we don't talk about young entrepreneurs anymore.
We will.
So that's the only thing that's going to change. And, if all of you turn into unicorns, we'd be ever so happy. And think about the giving back method as well. That was just the last words. If you are an investor, if you're interested, if you just want to know about one of the projects, about one of the startups, there are boards outside. The people are going to be identifiable because their badges are green. So look for the green badges, get into conversation, talk to you, and you're happy to do that? Yes? Yes, I got a nod there. Fine. And you can do that right now because this milestone is finished. We're off to the races for the next milestone. And all of you, wherever you are, keep up that energy and keep going. And Kola, not just a silver lining. I thought today we saw a bit more than that. I think we saw a streak of silver. So, ladies and gentlemen, in that spirit, it was great to have had you. Thank you. And enjoy your lunch. It will not be your last.
And can we have a big hand for the moderator, please?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good.